Maybe try background work instead. Eric Donovan didn't even look up from his clipboard as he spoke, his green polo shirt and navy blazer catching the natural light pouring through the casting studio's skylights. Layla Hassan had just finished her monologue flawlessly, but Eric's pen was already scratching her name off the callback list. The midday brightness made his contempt crystal clear as he finally glanced up. "Look, sweetheart, we're going for aspirational casting here." His assistant nodded along like a bobblehead, while Layla stood there in her red dress, hands steady despite the humiliation. Eric adjusted his expensive watch, completely unaware that in 18 months, she'd be signing his termination papers as the studio's new majority shareholder. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Layla Hassan felt every molecule of oxygen leave the bright casting room as Eric Donovan's dismissal echoed off the white walls. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, illuminating every detail of this moment she would never forget. Her red dress, carefully chosen that morning, suddenly felt like a target rather than armor. Aspirational casting. The phrase kept swirling in her gut as the meaning settled. Standing tall at 5 feet 7 inches with impeccable posture from years of classical training, Layla had prepped for this audition like a surgeon about to undertake a heart transplant. She knew every line off by heart. She knew the character's motivation. She researched the director's previous work. Through her MBA at Harvard, she had been prepared for everything, but not for blatant discrimination hidden behind creative direction. Eric Donovan looked up from his clipboard and casually glanced at her with his pale eyes, a look of callous cruelty as though he hadn't been caught before. The director's chair he was leaning back on caught the light from the glass-roofed studio, which reflected of his smug face. "Do you comprehend what I mean? We need someone who truly resonates with the target demographic for this family project." Monique Fields, his assistant, squirmed in her chair next to him. She was embarrassed by his comment, and that dark skin of hers flushed as she said it and avoided eye contact, fingers drumming on her tablet. The woman knows this is racist, but says nothing as she weighs her conscience against her salary. The burgundy blouse and black slacks didn't seem to have much volume, as the boss's bigotry appeared casual. The casting studio's open layout meant every word carried to the waiting area beyond the glass partition. 3 other actors sat on the sleek white benches, their conversations dying as Eric's voice carried across the space. A young Latina woman in a blue sundress and white cardigan froze mid-sentence. An older black man in khaki pants and a striped shirt lowered his script, his weathered face hardening with recognition. A white actress in designer jeans and a cream blouse suddenly found her phone fascinating. Layla's mind raced through 18 years of training that had led to this moment. Juilliard summers, Shakespeare workshops, method acting intensives where she'd learned to channel emotion into power. But no acting coach had prepared her for this particular performance. Maintaining dignity while being systematically devalued. "We're really looking for someone more mainstream for the lead," Eric continued, his pen tapping against the clipboard with annoying precision. The afternoon light made his condescension practically glow as he spoke. "But hey, there's always crowd work. Pays decent, and you wouldn't have to worry about carrying dialogue." The suggestion hit like a physical blow. Layla Hassan held dual degrees from institutions Eric probably couldn't get into if he tried. Her undergraduate theater degree from Yale came with honors and a thesis on representation in contemporary media. Her Harvard MBA specialized in entertainment industry finance, completed while working nights in regional theater. She'd analyzed acquisition strategies for companies just like the one Eric worked for, understanding their revenue streams better than most executives. But Eric Donovan saw only what he wanted to see. filtering her through his narrow lens of who deserved spotlight versus shadows. His green polo shirt bore the studio's logo, a constant reminder that his prejudice came with institutional backing. The navy blazer suggested authority he'd never truly earned, built on a foundation of systematic exclusion rather than genuine talent recognition. The other actors in the waiting area weren't even pretending to ignore the conversation now. The Latina actress's hands clenched into fists, her script crumpling slightly. The older black actor shook his head slowly, recognition of a familiar pattern written across his features. Even the white actress looked uncomfortable, though she remained safely silent. Monique Fields finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. "Mr. Donovan, perhaps we should review her headshots again. Her acting credentials are quite impressive." Eric waved her off with irritating casualness, his expensive watch catching the light. "We've seen enough." Next, the word carried finality that brooked no argument, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real pushback for his decisions. Layla Hassan stood motionless for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Her red dress seemed to intensify under the bright lights, making her a crimson focal point in the sterile white room. Every instinct screamed at her to respond, to unleash the fury building in her chest, to educate this man about exactly who he was dismissing. Instead, she smiled. The expression wasn't warm or friendly. It carried the cold precision of someone making mental calculations, filing away every detail for future reference. Eric's smug face, Monique's uncomfortable silence, the witness accounts from the waiting area, everything stored with photographic clarity. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Donovan." Her voice carried no trace of the humiliation burning through her veins. "I'm sure we'll speak again soon." Eric barely looked up and was shuffling through headshots for his next victim. The dismissal was total, laid back, and entirely unforgettable. With perfect posture, Layla Hassan turned and walked towards the exit, and her heels tapped against the floor. With each step, she distanced herself from the most humiliating professional moment of her life, toward an event that Eric Donovan could not imagine. The studio was filled with bright afternoon sunlight that streamed through the glass walls into the studio, so that when I moved around, it went with me and made my red dress glow. As she passed the waiting area, the older black actor caught her eye and nodded slightly. A gesture of solidarity, recognition, and shared understanding of what they'd all witnessed. The Latina actress offered a sympathetic smile. Even Monique Fields watched her departure with what looked like regret. The studio's glass doors closed behind her with a soft whisper, sealing Eric Donovan's fate, though he'd never know it. Outside, the city bustled with afternoon energy under cloudless skies. Traffic moved with purpose. Pedestrians navigated crowded sidewalks, and somewhere in the distance, construction cranes reached toward the sky like mechanical prayers. Layla Hassan stood on the sidewalk for exactly 10 seconds, letting the weight of the moment settle into her bones. The humiliation was real, sharp, and absolutely unacceptable. But underneath the anger, something else was crystallizing. Not revenge. That was too simple, too emotional. This required something far more sophisticated. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in months. Christopher Adeyemi, Harvard MBA class of 2019, currently working private equity deals for entertainment acquisitions. Their study group had once joked about buying Hollywood studios instead of working for them. The joke wasn't funny anymore. It was a business plan. As Layla Hassan walked away from the casting studio, her reflection caught in the building's mirrored windows. Red dress blazing in the afternoon sun, spine straight, mind already 3 moves ahead. Eric Donovan thought he was looking at someone suitable for background work. He had no idea he'd just met his future boss. The casting studio's bright lights continued buzzing overhead, illuminating Eric's next dismissal, while 18 months of methodical corporate warfare began forming in the mind of the woman he'd just underestimated. The natural skylight that had witnessed his casual cruelty would eventually illuminate his professional funeral. But that was a story for another day. An area is considered a fancy restaurant in the morning sun of Meridian Grill. The polished marble floor with shiny silverware. Layla Hassan sat opposite Christopher Adeyemi in a corner table under overhead restaurant fluorescent lights that happily coincided with natural light from outside. The man was wearing an orange button-down shirt and navy slacks. He was confident in his stance. He works in private equity. Layla had worn a red silk blouse and a tailored black skirt for the meeting, indicating her seriousness in the meeting. "I still can't believe he said that to you," Christopher said, shaking his head as he set down his coffee cup. His Harvard MBA classmate had just finished recounting yesterday's devastating audition experience, every humiliating detail still fresh in her memory. "The audacity of this Eric Donovan character is beyond anything I've encountered in corporate boardrooms, and I've seen some ruthless executives." Layla Hassan's eyes held a steely determination that hadn't been there during their graduation ceremony 3 years ago. "Christopher, I've made a decision. I'm done chasing roles and begging people like Eric Donovan for opportunities. It's time to pivot everything I learned at Harvard toward entertainment business strategy." Her voice remarkably changed in character. The humiliation of the day before had vanished, replaced by a professional analytical rigor that was one of the hallmarks of their MBA graduate. Christopher leaned forward, identifying the same strategic mindset that had distinguished Layla Hassan in corporate finance and strategic management classes. "You're talking about business warfare," Christopher observed, his private equity background immediately grasping the implications. "Layla, your academic credentials are impressive enough for any Fortune 500 company. Harvard MBA with dual concentration in finance and strategic management, magna cum laude undergraduate degree in business administration, and you speak 4 languages fluently. You're uniquely positioned for this kind of corporate campaign." Layla Hassan consented and began to think of ways. "For the entirety of last night, I've been thinking about this. Eric Donovan is everything wrong with this industry, certainly, although he is just one cog in this big machinery. What if I got powerful enough to change the system from within instead?" Christopher's expression grew animated as he recognized the brilliance of her approach. His connections in private equity had taught him to spot undervalued acquisition targets, and entertainment companies often presented unique opportunities for strategic investors. "That's actually genius, Layla. The entertainment industry is notorious for outdated leadership structures and resistance to change. But financial pressure can accomplish what moral arguments never could." "That's right," Layla Hassan responded, pulling out her tablet and reviewing a preliminary research document she had been compiling all night. "I have been analyzing Eric Donovan's studio, Pinnacle Entertainment Group. 3 quarters of lower revenues, lackluster performance of their latest releases, and a significant debt burden from over-investment in projects that failed to find an audience." Christopher examined the financial data, his private equity training immediately identifying the vulnerabilities that Layla Hassan had discovered. "These numbers tell a story of a company ripe for acquisition. Their stock price has dropped 30% in the last year, and their debt-to-equity ratio suggests they're struggling with cash flow management." The restaurant buzzed with activity around them. Business professionals conducting their own strategic meetings under the same bright lighting that illuminated Layla Hassan's transformation from rejected actress to potential corporate predator. She scrolled through more research, revealing the depth of preparation that had consumed her entire night. "I know who owns what," Layla Hassan says, confident that she has found her call. "Walter Pemberton holds majority control as CEO. But there are several minority shareholders that would likely sell on a reasonable offer. The firm is privately held, and acquisition would be more complicated, but not impossible." Christopher got very excited as he saw the smart strategy concocted from their conversation. "Layla, I know people in private equity all over. People who invest in the entertainment really look for underpriced acquisition targets that are fundamentally strong and have good prospects for value creation and growth. That's where you come in, Layla Hassan said, her strategic thinking creating a clear path forward. I need to build a war chest significant enough to make a serious acquisition attempt, but first, I need to understand exactly how vulnerable Pinnacle Entertainment Group really is. The waiter refilled their coffee cups, and Christopher used the brief interruption to consider the implications of what Layla Hassan was proposing. When they were alone again, he leaned across the table with the intensity of someone who had found a genuinely exciting investment opportunity. You'll need substantial capital for this kind of undertaking, Christopher warned, though his tone suggested he believed the strategy could succeed. Entertainment company acquisitions require serious financial backing, especially if you want controlling interest. Layla Hassan smiled, revealing another piece of her strategic puzzle. I'm planning to contact my uncle Samuel Hassan this afternoon. He's built a successful business empire over the last 30 years, and he's always encouraged my entrepreneurial instincts. This represents exactly the kind of investment opportunity that appeals to his strategic thinking. While the same brightly lit studio where he had embarrassed Layla Hassan, Eric Donovan was conducting another audition session at Pinnacle Entertainment Group's casting offices across town. He was sitting at the same table and wore a green polo and navy blazer, his armored uniform against the storm of aspiring actors. Natural skylight streamed through the windows, just as Miguel Santos, a young Latino actor with talent, finishes delivering his monologue. His performance indicates that he deserves strong consideration for the leading role of the production. Eric Donovan couldn't even bother looking up from his notes, his body language already saying no. "Thanks, Miguel," said Eric Donovan, in a similar condescending tone he had earlier used on Layla Hassan. "Your work was okay, but we need someone more mainstream for this one. Maybe you should try for some smaller roles which may suit your demographic." Monique Fields, the assistant to Eric Donovan, shifted uncomfortably in her seat at another instance of everyday discrimination. She carefully took down Miguel Santos's credentials and noted the rejection by Eric Donovan, though she wasn't sure of what she will do with the papers she was compiling. Miguel Santos left the studio with the same dejected expression that Layla Hassan had worn 24 hours earlier. Another talented performer dismissed because of Eric Donovan's biased preconceptions about audience preferences and marketability. Back at Meridian Grill, Layla Hassan was outlining the next phases of her strategic campaign. "Christopher, I need you to help me identify every financial vulnerability that Pinnacle Entertainment Group is trying to hide. Board composition, major shareholders, debt obligations, upcoming contract renewals, everything that could provide leverage in acquisition negotiations." Christopher nodded, already mentally reviewing his network of contacts who could provide the kind of detailed financial intelligence that Layla Hassan would need. "I can have preliminary research completed within 72 hours. My team specializes in exactly this kind of corporate due diligence for potential acquisition targets." The emotional transformation happening across the table was remarkable to witness. Yesterday's humiliated actress had evolved into today's strategic corporate warrior, her Harvard MBA training finally finding its perfect application. Layla Hassan's analytical mind was processing multiple scenarios simultaneously, considering contingencies and backup strategies with the same precision she had applied to case studies during their graduate program. "There's something poetic about this approach," Layla Hassan reflected, her voice carrying both determination and a hint of anticipated satisfaction. "Eric Donovan thinks he has power because he controls casting decisions for individual projects. But real power in this industry comes from controlling the companies that finance those projects." Christopher raised his coffee cup in a mock toast to strategic thinking and long-term planning. Eric Donovan has no idea what kind of storm he created when he decided to humiliate someone with your credentials and determination. As their lunch meeting came to a close, both of them energized by the possibilities they had discussed. Layla Hassan felt the last remnants of yesterday's despair being replaced with focused anticipation. She found her route to justice through the very corporate structures that allowed Eric Donovan's discrimination to happen unchallenged. The bright lights of the restaurant seemed to indicate the sort of clarity of vision stemming from the strategic planning session. Layla Hassan gathered her materials. As she made preparations for the phone call to her uncle Samuel Hassan, she would embark in the next phase of her campaign. The discriminatory casting practices of Eric Donovan continued without his knowledge of the fact that his latest target had the business sense and networking ability to disassemble everything he created. His arrogance has already sown the seeds of his downfall. The elevator chimed softly as Layla Hassan stepped into the 42nd floor of Hassan Industries. Her red blazer and black pencil skirt, a stark contrast against the gleaming marble lobby. Natural light flooded through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting brilliant rays across the polished surfaces. She clutched her leather portfolio tighter, knowing that the next hour would determine whether her audacious plan would become reality or remain a fantasy born from humiliation. Samuel Hassan's corner office commanded a panoramic view of the city skyline, the afternoon sun streaming through pristine glass walls. At 63, her uncle possessed the distinguished bearing of a man who had built his business empire from nothing. His navy blue jacket perfectly tailored over a crisp white shirt, his salt and pepper beard was meticulously groomed, and his dark eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made him one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the region. "Layla, my dear." Samuel rose from behind his mahogany desk, embracing her warmly. "You sounded quite mysterious on the phone. Business ventures, acquisitions, entertainment industry. This is quite a departure from your acting aspirations." Layla settled into the plush leather chair across from his desk, the natural lighting illuminating her determined expression. "Uncle Samuel, what I'm about to propose will sound unconventional, but I need you to hear me out completely before making any judgments." Samuel leaned back, his fingers steepled. "You have my full attention." Opening her portfolio, Layla withdrew a meticulously prepared presentation. 3 days ago, I was humiliated by a casting director named Eric Donovan. He didn't just reject me for a role. He degraded me, suggested I wasn't aspirational enough for family entertainment, and recommended I consider background work instead. Her voice remained steady, professional. But his mistake was underestimating exactly who he was dismissing. Samuel's expression darkened. "This man insulted my niece?" "He insulted me, yes. But more importantly, he revealed a systematic problem within his company. And companies like his, that represents both a moral failing and a significant business opportunity." Layla spread financial documents across the desk. "I've spent the last 72 hours analyzing Meridian Entertainment Studios, the company where Eric Donovan serves as head of casting. What I discovered is a studio on the brink of financial collapse, managed by executives who are so focused on their personal biases that they're blind to changing market demographics." Samuel examined the documents, his business acumen immediately recognizing the quality of her research. "These numbers are quite thorough. Where did you acquire this level of financial intelligence?" "My Harvard MBA wasn't just for show, Uncle Samuel. I've maintained connections with classmates in investment banking, private equity, and corporate analysis." Layla pulled out additional charts. "Meridian Studios has been hemorrhaging money for 18 months. Their last 4 major productions underperformed, specifically because they failed to connect with diverse audiences. Meanwhile, studios that embrace inclusive casting and storytelling are seeing record profits." The older man studied the profit and loss statements, his eyebrows rising. "A 40% revenue decline over 2 years. That's catastrophic." "Exactly. But here's what makes this perfect," Layla continued, her confidence building. "The current ownership structure is fragmented. The founding family maintains only 35% control, with the remainder spread across various minority investors who are increasingly concerned about their returns. A coordinated acquisition strategy could secure controlling interest for approximately $47 million. Samuel set down the papers, studying his niece with new respect. This isn't about revenge, is it? This is a legitimate business opportunity. The business opportunity is real and substantial. The potential for profit is enormous. But yes, Uncle Samuel, there's also a personal element. Eric Donovan and executives like him have been gatekeepers for too long, determining who gets opportunities based on their narrow worldview rather than talent or market demand. I want to prove that diversity isn't just morally right, it's financially superior. Samuel walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. $47 million is not an insignificant investment. What kind of returns are you projecting? Layla joined him at the window, the afternoon sun casting their shadows across the office floor. Conservative estimates suggest we could triple the studio's profitability within 2 years through strategic repositioning, inclusive content development, and tapping into underserved market segments. The demographic trends are undeniable, Uncle Samuel. The entertainment industry is evolving, and companies that adapt will dominate, and those that don't will become cautionary tales. Layla's smile was sharp. Eric Donovan dismissed me because he couldn't imagine that a black woman could be the face of aspirational entertainment. I'm going to prove him wrong while building a more profitable, more ethical company in the process. Samuel returned to his desk, pulling out a leather-bound checkbook. I've seen hostile takeovers destroy companies and lives, Layla, but I've also seen them save struggling businesses from incompetent leadership. He began writing, "This is seed money, $5 million to get you started. But I want regular reports, and I want to meet every key player on your team." Layla accepted the check, her heart racing. "You won't regret this investment." "I know I won't. You're a Hassan. We don't fail. We adapt and conquer." 2 hours later, Layla sat in the downtown law offices of Vasquez and Associates. Natural light streaming through the conference room skylights. Helena Vasquez, a sharp-featured woman in her early 40s, wore a burgundy-red suit that commanded attention even in the bright professional setting. Her reputation for navigating complex entertainment industry acquisitions was legendary. "Hostile takeovers in entertainment are particularly complex," Helena explained, spreading legal documents across the polished conference table. "Unlike manufacturing or retail, studios have intangible assets, talent contracts, and creative partnerships that can evaporate if handled improperly." Layla reviewed the acquisition timeline Helena had prepared. "How do we maintain operational continuity while removing problematic leadership?" "Surgical precision. We identify key talent and creators early, securing their loyalty before making our move. We document any legal violations or discriminatory practices that could justify leadership changes, and we present ourselves as saviors rather than conquerors." Helena's smile was predatory. The beauty of acquiring a struggling company is that employees are usually grateful for competent new management. "What about Eric Donovan specifically?" "We build an airtight case. Discrimination in hiring is not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable and financially damaging. If he's been making biased casting decisions, we document everything." Helena leaned forward. "By the time we take control, his removal will seem inevitable rather than vindictive." Meanwhile, across town in Meridian Studios' casting department, Eric Donovan was conducting another session under harsh fluorescent lights. He wore the same green polo shirt and navy blazer, his arrogant demeanor unchanged since his encounter with Layla. Before him stood Marcus Williams, a talented black actor, auditioning for a leading role in the studio's upcoming family drama. "Look, Marcus, you've got decent chops," Eric said dismissively, not bothering to look up from his phone. "But this particular role requires someone more mainstream, more relatable to our core demographic. Have you considered urban drama?" That might be more your speed." Monique Fields, his assistant, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her pen hovering over her notepad. The uncomfortable silence stretched as Marcus maintained his dignity, despite the obvious slight. "I understand the character deeply, Mr. Donovan. I prepared extensively for this audition," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm sure you did, but understanding and embodying are different things. We need someone who naturally fits the aspirational family market." Eric finally looked up. "Leave your headshot. We'll keep you in mind for future projects that better suit your particular strengths." After Marcus left, Monique finally spoke up. He was actually quite good. His interpretation of the dialogue was nuanced and, "Monique, I've been in this business for 15 years. I know what works and what doesn't. Trust me on this." Eric returned to his phone, dismissing her concerns entirely. But Monique had begun keeping detailed notes about these interactions, her discomfort growing with each passing week. She had witnessed too many qualified actors dismissed for reasons that had nothing to do with talent. Back at Helena's office, Layla was building her acquisition team systematically. Christopher Adeyemi had agreed to handle the financial structuring through his private equity connections. Helena would manage all legal aspects. Samuel Hassan's network provided additional investor contacts who were intrigued by the entertainment industry opportunity. "The key is patience," Helena advised as they reviewed their timeline. "We can't appear desperate or vindictive. This has to look like a strategic business decision made by savvy investors who recognize undervalued assets." Layla nodded, studying the corporate structure charts. "How long before we can make our first move?" "I recommend we spend the next 3 months quietly acquiring minority shares through shell companies. Nothing dramatic, just enough to establish our presence. Meanwhile, we continue documenting the current management's failures and building relationships with key employees who might become allies." "And Eric Donovan?" Helena's smile was cold. "Eric Donovan will continue being Eric Donovan. Men like him are remarkably consistent in their prejudices. Every discriminatory decision he makes strengthens our case for new leadership." As evening approached, Layla stood once again in her uncle's office, watching the city lights begin to twinkle below. Samuel joined her at the window, both of them silhouetted against the brilliant skyline. "You understand this won't be quick or simple," Samuel said quietly. "Corporate warfare requires patience, precision, and absolute commitment." "I understand completely. But Uncle Samuel, this is bigger than Eric Donovan or even Meridian Studios. This is about proving that diverse leadership creates better business outcomes. That inclusion drives innovation and profit." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always said the Hassan family succeeds not through force, but through intelligence and persistence. Then we succeed by being smarter, more strategic, and more committed than our opponents." "Exactly. And when Eric Donovan realizes what's happening, it will already be too late." Layla gathered her materials, her war chest now established, her team assembled, and her strategy crystallizing. Phase 1 was complete. Soon Eric Donovan would discover that the woman he dismissed as unaspirational had become the architect of his professional destruction. The transformation had begun. The gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower buzzed with electric energy as morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. Overhead fluorescent lights cast everything in sharp, crystalline clarity, illuminating the war room where Layla Hassan's carefully orchestrated revenge was about to enter its most critical phase. 6 months had passed since that humiliating audition. 6 months of meticulous planning, strategic networking, and corporate maneuvering that would have impressed her Harvard Business School professors. Layla Hassan stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, her red blazer and black slacks projecting the confident authority of a woman who had transformed pain into power. Her fingers traced across financial documents spread before her like a general reviewing battle plans. The numbers told a story of systematic acquisition, strategic positioning, and corporate vulnerability that few people could read with such precision. Christopher Adeyemi adjusted his green dress shirt as he reviewed the latest market reports. His navy slacks pressed to perfection. His private equity background had proven invaluable in identifying the weak points in Pinnacle Studios' financial armor. The studio's recent string of box office disappointments, combined with their over-leveraged position on streaming content development, had created exactly the opening they needed. The shell companies have successfully acquired 12% of outstanding shares, Christopher announced, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a chess master executing a complex gambit. Delta Holdings, Phoenix Ventures, and Meridian Capital are all positioned exactly where we need them. Walter Pemberton has no idea these entities are connected. Helena Vasquez looked up from her legal briefs, her signature red suit catching the bright overhead lighting. The entertainment lawyer's reputation for brilliant corporate negotiations had made her the perfect addition to their team. Her expertise in hostile takeovers within the entertainment industry had transformed Layla's burning desire for justice into a sophisticated business strategy. The beauty of this approach, Helena explained, organizing her documents with practiced efficiency, is that we're operating completely within legal parameters while maintaining absolute anonymity. Each shell company has legitimate business purposes, proper corporate structures, and clean financial backing. When we're ready to reveal ourselves, there won't be a single legal challenge they can mount. Layla Hassan felt a surge of professional pride as she surveyed the evidence of their progress. Her Harvard MBA training had prepared her for corporate warfare, but nothing had motivated her quite like Eric Donovan's casual cruelty. Every discriminatory comment he had made now fueled her determination to dismantle his influence systematically. Meanwhile, across town, in the same casting studio where Layla's dreams had been shattered, Eric Donovan continued his pattern of discriminatory behavior, completely oblivious to the forces mobilizing against him. The morning sun streamed through the studio's skylights, casting the same harsh light that had witnessed Layla's humiliation 6 months earlier. Eric sat behind his familiar desk, wearing his usual green polo shirt and navy blazer, reviewing headshots for a major family drama series. His expression carried the same dismissive arrogance that had crushed Layla's aspirations, the same casual prejudice that had become his signature approach to casting decisions. Next, he called out, barely glancing up as Marcus Williams, a talented black actor with extensive theater credits, entered for his audition. The young man wore a blue button-down shirt and black slacks, his resume showcasing impressive dramatic training and multiple award nominations. Monique Fields sat at her assistant's desk, her discomfort growing more pronounced with each passing day. She had witnessed this scene too many times, watched Eric dismiss qualified performers based on unconscious biases that he refused to acknowledge. Her small notebook, hidden beneath casting schedules, had grown thick with documented incidents of discriminatory behavior. "I see you have Shakespeare experience," Eric said, his tone suggesting this was somehow problematic rather than impressive. "We're looking for someone more accessible for our family audience. Someone who won't intimidate mainstream viewers." Marcus maintained his professional composure despite the obviously coded language. "I have extensive experience in family-friendly productions as well. My work with the Children's Theater Collective has taught me how to connect with audiences of all ages." Eric barely listened, already reaching for the next headshot. "We'll be in touch," he said dismissively, the same phrase that had become his standard rejection for performers who didn't fit his narrow vision of marketability. As Marcus left the studio, Monique Fields made another careful notation in her hidden record. She had initially justified her silence as professional discretion, but Eric's pattern had become so blatant that her conscience wouldn't allow her to ignore it anymore. Each documented incident felt like evidence in a trial that hadn't yet been scheduled. Back in the Meridian Tower conference room, Layla Hassan's team continued their strategic planning session. Fatima Diallo had joined them, her insider knowledge of industry dynamics proving invaluable. The actress wore a red dress that seemed to channel the same determination that had driven Layla's transformation from performer to corporate strategist. "The whispers are getting louder," Fatima reported, her voice carrying both satisfaction and concern. "People in the industry are starting to openly discuss Eric's reputation. The Me Too movement has made everyone more aware of discriminatory behavior, and Eric's practices are becoming harder to ignore." Helena Vasquez looked up from her legal documents. "That creates an interesting dynamic for our acquisition strategy. The studio's reputation problems will make them more vulnerable to takeover. But we need to be careful about timing our reveal for maximum impact." Christopher Adjemi pulled up financial projections on his laptop. "Pinnacle Studios is hemorrhaging money faster than we anticipated. Their last 3 major releases underperformed dramatically, and their streaming content isn't generating the subscriber numbers they promised investors. Walter Pemberton is going to be forced into acquisition discussions sooner than we expected." The revelation sent a thrill of anticipation through the room. Layla Hassan had initially estimated their takeover timeline at 2 years. But Pinnacle Studios' accelerating financial crisis was compressing their schedule in ways that actually worked to their advantage. "How quickly can we be ready to move?" Layla asked, her strategic mind already adjusting their timeline. Helena consulted her acquisition calendar. "We can have controlling interest secured within 6 months if we accelerate our shell company purchases and coordinate with Walter Pemberton's growing desperation. The key is maintaining our anonymity while positioning ourselves as his most attractive option." Meanwhile, at Pinnacle Studios, Walter Pemberton was indeed feeling the pressure that Layla's team had predicted. The CEO sat in his corner office, natural light streaming through windows that offered a panoramic view of the entertainment district. His blue jacket reflected his 60-year career in Hollywood, but his expression showed a man watching his legacy crumble under financial pressure he couldn't control. His phone rang constantly, with calls from investment banks, private equity firms, and mysterious corporate entities expressing interest in acquisition discussions. Each call represented a potential lifeline, but also the possible end of his independent control over the studio he had built from nothing. "Mr. Pemberton," his secretary announced through the intercom, "you have another call from Phoenix Ventures regarding their acquisition proposal." Walter didn't recognize the name, but Phoenix Ventures had submitted one of the most comprehensive and attractive offers he had received. Their financial backing appeared solid, their business plan sophisticated, and their terms surprisingly favorable for existing management. What he didn't realize was that Phoenix Ventures was one of Layla Hassan's shell companies, designed to present exactly the kind of professional competence that would appeal to his business instincts. Back in the casting studio, Eric Donovan continued making decisions that would ultimately contribute to his own downfall. The afternoon brought another series of auditions, each one an opportunity for him to demonstrate the discriminatory patterns that Monique Fields continued documenting. "I just don't think she has the right look for our target demographic," Eric explained to Monique after dismissing another qualified black actress. "We need someone more aspirational for this family-friendly project." The words hit Monique like a physical blow. Those were almost exactly the same terms Eric had used when rejecting Layla Hassan 6 months earlier. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was becoming boldly repetitive, as if Eric felt completely protected from any consequences for his discriminatory behavior. That evening, in her small apartment, Monique Fields opened her laptop and began typing a detailed report of the day's events. What had started as personal protection had evolved into something larger, a comprehensive record of systematic discrimination that she sensed might someday be crucially important. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Layla Hassan stood in her own apartment, reviewing the day's progress. Financial reports, legal strategies, and corporate maneuvering documents covered her dining table like pieces of an intricate puzzle that was finally coming together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Pemberton scheduled preliminary acquisition meetings for next week. Phoenix Ventures is on the short list. Layla Hassan smiled, feeling the sweet anticipation of a plan approaching its moment of truth. Every humiliating word Eric Donovan had spoken was about to be transformed into the foundation of his professional destruction. Every dismissive gesture, every coded rejection, every moment of casual cruelty would soon be repaid with interest compounded by corporate precision. The hostile takeover wasn't just beginning, it was accelerating beyond her most optimistic projections. Within months, she would walk back into that casting studio, not as a hopeful actress seeking approval, but as the CEO holding Eric Donovan's career in her hands. Justice, it turned out, was best served with overwhelming corporate firepower and Harvard MBA strategic planning. Eric Donovan had underestimated the woman he had dismissed so casually, and that miscalculation was about to reshape both of their destinies in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. The war room in Meridian Tower would soon become the command center for the most satisfying business acquisition in entertainment industry history. The bright conference room on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower buzzed with quiet intensity as Layla Hassan reviewed the final acquisition documents. 12 months had passed since Eric Donovan's crushing rejection, and every single day had been meticulously planned toward this moment. Natural light flooded through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp shadows across the polished mahogany table where her destiny would be decided. Elena Vasquez adjusted her red blazer and straightened the stack of contracts before her, her dark eyes scanning each clause with the precision of a surgeon. The entertainment lawyer had become more than just legal counsel over the past year. She was Layla's strategic partner in this elaborate chess game, and today would determine whether their 18 months of careful maneuvering would pay off. The studio's quarterly reports just came in, Christopher Adeyemi announced as he entered the room, his green dress shirt crisp despite the early morning hour. His navy slacks were perfectly pressed, but Layla could see the tension in his shoulders. Her Harvard MBA classmate had invested more than money in this venture. His reputation in private equity was now tied to her success. Walter Pemberton called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. They're hemorrhaging cash faster than we anticipated. Layla Hassan felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with determination. She wore a sharp navy suit today, professional and understated, saving her red power pieces for the moment when she would finally reveal herself to Eric Donovan. Every detail mattered now, every decision calculated for maximum impact. Perfect timing, Helena said, her voice steady and confident. Our shell companies now control 38% of outstanding shares. Combined with the pension fund proxy votes we secured last month, we're positioned to force the sale. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of Los Angeles traffic far below. Layla stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city that had once seemed so hostile to her dreams. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, Eric Donovan was probably conducting another casting session, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. Has there been any indication that they suspect our involvement? Layla asked, her reflection ghost-like in the window glass. Christopher shook his head. The paper trail leads through 3 different investment firms in 2 countries. Even if they hired forensic accountants, it would take months to trace everything back to us. And they don't have months. The irony wasn't lost on Layla. While Eric Donovan had dismissed her as not aspirational enough for his projects, she had been quietly building an empire that would soon control his fate. Her Harvard MBA had taught her that information was power, but experience had taught her that patience was the ultimate weapon. Helena's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at the screen and smiled. Walter Pemberton's assistant. They want to schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss strategic partnership opportunities. They're ready to deal. Layla returned to her seat, feeling the weight of the moment. Every rejection, every sleepless night of strategic planning, Every carefully cultivated business relationship had led to this phone call. Set it up. But remember, my identity stays protected until I decide otherwise. Understood. I'll be representing Hassan Strategic Holdings exclusively. Your name won't appear anywhere in the initial negotiations. The next 24 hours felt like a lifetime compressed into moments. Layla found herself unable to focus on anything except the impending meeting. She reviewed financial projections, studied industry reports, and rehearsed negotiation scenarios, but her mind kept drifting to that bright casting room where Eric Donovan had humiliated her in front of witnesses. Meanwhile, across the city in the struggling Pinnacle Entertainment Studios, Eric Donovan was having the worst month of his career. Budget cuts had eliminated 3 major projects, forcing him to scramble for financing that seemed increasingly elusive. The stress was showing in his appearance. His usually perfect green polo looked wrinkled. His navy blazer hung awkwardly on his shoulders, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Mr. Donovan, we have the callback list ready for the Morrison project," Monique Field said as she entered his office. His assistant had been increasingly uncomfortable over the past year, quietly documenting his discriminatory practices in a personal journal she kept locked in her desk drawer. Eric barely looked up from his computer screen, where red numbers dominated every financial report. "Just send me the headshots. I don't have time for lengthy discussions today." Monique placed the folder on his desk and watched as he flipped through the professional photographs. The callbacks represented some of the most talented actors who had auditioned, a diverse group of performers who had impressed everyone in the room with their skill and professionalism. "This one's all wrong for the role," Eric said dismissively, tossing aside the headshot of Marcus Williams, a classically trained actor from Juilliard. "And this one doesn't fit our target demographic." Another photo joined the discard pile. Keisha Thompson, whose audition had moved several crew members to tears. "Sir, both of those actors received unanimous praise from the reading panel," Monique said carefully. "Their auditions were exceptional, and they fit the character descriptions perfectly." Eric's jaw tightened. The financial pressure was making him even more rigid in his prejudices, as if maintaining his discriminatory standards was the one thing he could still control. "I make the casting decisions here, Monique. Our investors expect a certain type of aspirational casting. These actors just don't project the image our audience wants to see." Monique felt her stomach clench as she made another mental note. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every actor Eric rejected happened to be Black or Latino, regardless of their talent or suitability for the role. She thought about the young woman who had auditioned over a year ago, the one Eric had dismissed so cruelly that it had haunted Monique ever since. "Should I schedule the callbacks for tomorrow morning?" she asked. "Yes, but only for the actors I didn't eliminate. And Monique, make sure the casting director understands our standards. I can't afford any mistakes on this project." As Monique left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in the industry around them. Her friend Fatima Diallo had mentioned strange rumors circulating among actors and agents, whispers about Eric's reputation, quiet warnings shared in green rooms and coffee shops across Hollywood. That afternoon, while Eric conducted his systematically biased casting sessions, Layla Hassan sat in the Meridian Tower boardroom, preparing for the most important negotiation of her life. Helena had spread contracts across the table like battle plans, each document representing another step toward victory. Walter Pemberton agreed to the meeting Helena announced. 10 a.m. tomorrow in their executive conference room. He'll be bringing their CFO and head of legal. Any indication of their bottom line? Sources suggest they need at least $50 million in immediate capital injection to avoid bankruptcy. Their debt service alone is crushing them, and they've already mortgaged most of their physical assets. Christopher looked up from his laptop, where he'd been analyzing market conditions. The entertainment sector is still recovering from the streaming wars. Traditional studios like Pinnacle are particularly vulnerable. We're offering them survival, not just investment. Layla nodded, feeling the pieces of her elaborate revenge falling into place. But this had evolved beyond personal vengeance. She genuinely saw an opportunity to transform not just one studio, but the entire culture of an industry that had rejected her. "What's our opening position?" Helena smiled, the expression sharp and professional. 60% controlling interest for 45 million cash, plus assumption of 20 million in specific debts. We maintain all current employment contracts but reserve the right to restructure management positions. The language was clinical, but Layla understood its devastating implications for Eric Donovan. His employment contract would remain technically valid, but as the new majority owner, she would have complete authority to restructure his role right out of existence. "And if they counter, we're prepared to go as high as 55 million for 51% control. Anything less than majority ownership defeats our purpose." That evening, Layla couldn't sleep. She stood on her apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 18 months ago, she had been a hopeful actress with an MBA, believing that talent and preparation would be enough to overcome any obstacle. Now she was about to become one of the most powerful executives in Hollywood, with the capability to reshape an entire company's culture. Her phone buzzed with a text from Fatima Diallo. "Girl, something big is happening at Pinnacle. Everyone's talking about mysterious investors and emergency board meetings." Eric Donovan looked stressed at today's industry mixer. Layla smiled in the darkness. The entertainment industry was smaller than people realized, and gossip traveled faster than official announcements. By tomorrow afternoon, word of the ownership change would ripple through every talent agency, casting director's office, and actors' workshop in Los Angeles. The morning of the negotiation dawned clear and bright, with California sunshine streaming through the windows of Pinnacle Entertainment's executive conference room. Walter Pemberton sat at the head of the polished table, his blue jacket impeccable despite the circumstances that had forced this meeting. At 63, he had built Pinnacle from a small production company into a respected studio. But changing market dynamics and poor financial decisions had brought him to this desperate moment. Helena Vasquez entered the room with the confidence of someone who held all the strongest cards. Her red suit was perfectly tailored, projecting both professionalism and power. She carried herself like the Harvard-trained lawyer she was, but also like someone representing interests far more sophisticated than Walter Pemberton had anticipated. "Ms. Vasquez, thank you for coming," Walter said, rising to shake her hand. "I understand Hassan Strategic Holdings is interested in a partnership with Pinnacle Entertainment." "More than a partnership, Mr. Pemberton. We're prepared to make a substantial investment that would solve your immediate liquidity crisis and position Pinnacle for long-term growth." The CFO, a nervous man in his 40s, leaned forward eagerly. The company's books were worse than the public filings indicated, and everyone in the room knew that without immediate capital injection, Pinnacle would be filing for bankruptcy within 60 days. "What kind of investment structure are we discussing?" Walter asked. Helena opened her leather portfolio with deliberate precision. "Hassan Strategic Holdings is prepared to invest $45 million in immediate capital plus assumption of $20 million in targeted debts in exchange for 60% controlling interest in Pinnacle Entertainment." The silence that followed was deafening. Walter Pemberton's face went pale as he realized what was being offered wasn't a partnership, but a complete takeover disguised as a rescue. 60%? The head of legal sputtered. "That would give your client complete operational control." "Yes, it would," Helena replied calmly. "Hassan Strategic Holdings believes Pinnacle has tremendous potential, but realizing that potential will require significant operational changes. My client isn't interested in being a passive investor." Walter Pemberton had been in the entertainment business for over 3 decades. He knew a power play when he saw one, but he also knew that drowning men rarely got to choose their lifeboats. "Who exactly is Hassan Strategic Holdings?" We'd need to know who we'd be working with." Helena's smile was polite but revealed nothing. "My client prefers to maintain privacy during initial negotiations. I can assure you that Hassan Strategic Holdings has extensive experience in entertainment industry operations and a clear vision for Pinnacle's future." While Helena negotiated Layla's corporate victory, Eric Donovan was 3 floors below conducting what would become his final casting session under the old regime. The financial pressure had made him even more erratic, and today's auditions showcased his discrimination in its most blatant form. "Next," he called out, barely looking up as Sierra Martinez entered the bright casting room. She was a recent graduate from Yale Drama School, with credits in several off-Broadway productions and a resume that demonstrated both talent and dedication. Sierra began her prepared monologue, delivering a performance that was both technically flawless and emotionally compelling. The few crew members present exchanged impressed glances, but Eric's expression remained dismissive. "Thank you, that's enough," he interrupted before she could finish. "You're just not what we're looking for on this project. Is there anything specific I could adjust for the callback?" Sierra asked professionally. Eric's response was swift and devastating. "Look, you seem nice enough, but this is a family-friendly production. We need someone more relatable to mainstream audiences. Maybe try some of the smaller indie projects." Monique Fields felt her heart sink as she watched another talented performer dismissed for reasons that had nothing to do with ability. She made careful notes in her journal, documenting the exchange along with dozens of similar incidents over the past months. As Sierra left the room with her dignity intact but her hopes crushed, Monique couldn't help thinking about that other actress from over a year ago, the one whose humiliation had been even more public and brutal. She wondered what had happened to her, whether she had found success elsewhere or simply given up on her Hollywood dreams. By noon, Helena had successfully negotiated the acquisition terms that would give Layla Hassan complete control of Pinnacle Entertainment. Walter Pemberton had initially tried to counter with 45% for the same price, but the financial reality was undeniable. Hassan Strategic Holdings was the only entity willing to provide the capital Pinnacle needed to survive. "We'll need 48 hours to review the terms with our board," Walter said finally. 24 hours, Helena countered smoothly. "This offer expires tomorrow at 5 p.m. Hassan Strategic Holdings has other opportunities under consideration." The ultimatum was delivered with professional courtesy, but its implications were clear. Walter Pemberton could accept the deal and retain some involvement in the company he had built, or he could watch it collapse into bankruptcy and lose everything. As Helena packed up her documents, she felt a surge of professional satisfaction. The negotiation had unfolded exactly as Layla had predicted, each pressure point identified and exploited with surgical precision. More than that, she genuinely believed Layla would transform Pinnacle into something better than it had ever been. That evening, Eric Donovan sat in his office, reviewing the day's casting notes, completely unaware that his professional future was being decided in boardrooms high above his head. The financial pressures had him looking at smaller projects, backup plans, and cost-cutting measures that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. His phone buzzed with a text from a colleague at another studio. "Heard there are big changes coming at Pinnacle. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. You hearing anything?" Eric frowned and typed back, "First I'm hearing of it. Probably just more budget restructuring." But as he looked around his office, at the walls covered with posters from successful projects and photographs with industry luminaries, Eric felt a flicker of unease. Change was the one constant in Hollywood, and lately, all the changes seemed to be working against him. The next morning brought crystal-clear skies and the kind of bright California sunshine that made everything seem possible. In the Pinnacle Entertainment boardroom, Walter Pemberton called the emergency meeting to order, his blue jacket crisp despite the sleepless night he'd spent reviewing the Hassan Strategic Holdings proposal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to vote on an acquisition offer that would provide immediate capital injection in exchange for majority ownership, he announced to the assembled board members. The vote was swift and unanimous. Faced with bankruptcy as the only alternative, the board approved the sale of 60% of Pinnacle Entertainment to the mysterious Hassan Strategic Holdings. Helena Vasquez received the call at exactly 2:47 p.m. "The board has approved the terms." Walter Pemberton's voice was tired but resigned. "When can we meet your client?" "Hassan Strategic Holdings will be ready to take operational control beginning Monday morning," Helena replied. "My client looks forward to working with the existing team to implement necessary changes." As Helena hung up the phone, she immediately called Layla Hassan with the news that would change everything. "It's done," she said simply. "You now own controlling interest in Pinnacle Entertainment." Layla Hassan closed her eyes and felt 18 months of strategic planning culminate in this single moment. The casting room where Eric Donovan had humiliated her was now legally hers. The discriminatory practices that had crushed so many dreams were now under her control to change. But more than revenge, she felt the weight of responsibility. Hundreds of employees, dozens of ongoing projects, and countless future opportunities now depended on her leadership. She had the power to transform not just Eric Donovan's fate, but the entire culture that had enabled his discrimination. "Schedule the announcement for Monday morning," Layla said. "And Helena, make sure Eric Donovan is present for the introduction." By Friday evening, word of the ownership change had begun circulating through Hollywood's interconnected network of agents, managers, and industry professionals. Fatima Diallo texted Layla, "Something huge is happening at Pinnacle. New ownership, major changes coming. The timing is incredible. Eric Donovan's discrimination is finally catching up to him." Layla smiled as she read the message. Her friend had no idea just how incredible the timing truly was, or how carefully orchestrated every element of this perfect storm had been. Eric Donovan learned about the ownership change in an impersonal email sent to all Pinnacle employees at 5:30 p.m. on Friday. The message was brief and professional. "Effective immediately, Hassan Strategic Holdings has acquired majority interest in Pinnacle Entertainment. New management will be introduced Monday morning at a company-wide meeting." He stared at the screen, feeling the first stirrings of genuine concern. Ownership changes usually meant management restructuring, and his recent track record of failed projects and budget overruns wouldn't provide much protection under new leadership. Still, Eric had survived industry changes before. His discriminatory practices had never been formally documented, and he had enough allies in the business to weather most storms. He had no way of knowing that his new boss had been personally victimized by his prejudice, or that she had spent 18 months carefully documenting every aspect of his behavior. As the weekend passed, Layla Hassan made her final preparations for the revelation that would complete her transformation from rejected actress to entertainment industry power broker. She chose her outfit carefully, a red suit that would immediately remind Eric Donovan of the day he had dismissed her so cruelly. Monday morning would bring justice, but it would also bring responsibility. Layla Hassan was about to discover that revenge was only the beginning of her journey. True power lay not in destroying her enemy, but in building something better from the wreckage of his discriminatory empire. The perfect storm had arrived, and Eric Donovan was about to learn that the young woman he had crushed 18 months earlier now controlled his destiny completely. The casting studio at Meridian Entertainment looked exactly the same as it had 18 months ago. The same natural daylight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in that harsh, unforgiving brightness that revealed every flaw, every imperfection, every moment of truth. The same fluorescent overhead lights hummed their monotonous tune, illuminating the space where dreams came to die and careers were casually destroyed with a few careless words. Eric Donovan stood in his usual position of power, wearing the same green polo shirt and navy blazer that had become his uniform of authority. His posture was familiar too, that casual arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable, who had spent years wielding his position like a weapon against anyone who didn't fit his narrow vision of what Hollywood should look like. He was in the middle of what had become his signature performance, dismissing yet another talented actress whose only crime was not matching his prejudiced expectations. "I'm sorry, but you're just not what we're looking for," Eric was saying to a young Latina actress who stood before him with the same hopeful expression that had once graced Layla Hassan's face in this very room. "Maybe something more urban would be a better fit for your particular look." Monique Fields sat at her usual desk, her fingers frozen over her tablet as she witnessed another moment of casual discrimination. The discomfort on her face had become a permanent fixture during these sessions, the weight of complicity growing heavier with each passing month. She had documented so many of these interactions now that her files read like a masterclass in workplace discrimination, each entry a testament to Eric's systematic prejudice. The actress left with the same dejected walk that dozens before her had perfected, another dream deferred by the institutional racism that Eric Donovan represented. The studio fell into its typical post-rejection silence, that moment when everyone pretended not to notice what they had just witnessed, when moral cowardice masqueraded as professional discretion. That's when the door opened. Layla Hassan stepped into the studio, wearing a perfectly tailored red executive suit that commanded attention and respect in equal measure. The crimson blazer and matching skirt spoke of power acquired and wielded with purpose. Her black heels clicked against the polished floor with the confident rhythm of someone who belonged exactly where they stood. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that framed her face with professional sophistication, and her posture radiated the kind of authority that came not from title alone, but from hard-won knowledge and strategic brilliance. The natural daylight that had once seemed so harsh now seemed to bend around her like a spotlight, illuminating her presence with an almost ethereal glow. She carried a leather portfolio that spoke of serious business, and her expression held the calm composure of someone who had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Eric Donovan looked up from his casting notes with casual indifference, not yet recognizing the woman who stood before him. His brain was still processing the familiar face when Layla spoke. "Good afternoon, Eric. I'm Layla Hassan, your new CEO." The words hit the studio like a physical force. Eric's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering onto his desk with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. His face underwent a transformation that would have been comedic if it weren't so deeply satisfying. Confusion flickered first, his brow furrowing as he tried to process what he was hearing. Then recognition dawned like a slow-motion catastrophe, his eyes widening as 18 months of memory came flooding back. The color drained from Eric's face so quickly that it seemed like someone had pulled a plug somewhere in his circulatory system. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air in an environment that no longer supported its existence. The casual arrogance that had defined his posture melted away, replaced by the kind of shock that comes when reality shifts so fundamentally that the ground seems to disappear beneath your feet. "You remember me, don't you, Eric?" Layla's voice was silk over steel, professional courtesy wrapped around absolute authority. 18 months ago, in this very room, you told me I wasn't aspirational enough for your projects. You suggested I might be better suited for background work." Monique Fields' tablet slipped from her nerveless fingers, the device hitting her desk with a bang that made several people jump. Her eyes were wide with disbelief and something that looked suspiciously like vindication. She had witnessed that original humiliation, had been forced to remain silent as Eric destroyed someone's dream with casual cruelty. Now she was watching the universe balance its scales in the most spectacular way possible. Eric's voice came out as barely more than a croak. "Layla, how did I become your boss?" Layla stepped further into the room, her presence seeming to fill every corner with quiet authority. 18 months of strategic planning, careful investment, and systematic acquisition of controlling shares in this studio. While you were busy discriminating against talented performers, I was busy buying your company out from under you. The other staff members who had witnessed Eric's pattern of discriminatory behavior were now staring with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed satisfaction. These were people who had been forced to participate in his systematic exclusion, who had watched talented performers dismissed because of their race, ethnicity, or failure to conform to Eric's narrow standards. The casting assistants, the production coordinators, the various personnel who had enabled Eric's discrimination through their silence, all now realized that their world had shifted on its axis. Eric struggled to his feet, his usual commanding presence reduced to desperate scrambling. "Layla, listen, if this is about what happened before, I can explain. That wasn't, the industry has standards, and I was just what, Eric?" Layla's tone remained perfectly professional, which somehow made her words more devastating than any angry outburst could have been. Just doing your job? Just maintaining standards? Just ensuring that Hollywood remained as unwelcoming as possible to anyone who didn't look like your ideal demographic? The truth of his situation was beginning to penetrate Eric's shock. This wasn't just about one rejected actress seeking revenge. This was about systematic change, about power structures being inverted, about 18 months of careful planning culminating in this moment of absolute reversal. He was no longer the gatekeeper. He was no longer the arbiter of dreams and careers. He was now subject to the judgment of someone whose dream he had casually crushed. "I have extensive documentation of your casting decisions over the past 5 years, Layla continued, her voice never rising above conversational level. "The patterns are quite clear. Rejection rates for minority performers that exceed statistical probability by enormous margins, comments that demonstrate clear bias, a systematic approach to maintaining homogeneity in your projects that violates both company policy and federal employment law." Monique Fields was nodding almost involuntarily, her years of reluctant documentation suddenly taking on new significance. Every uncomfortable moment she had witnessed, every discriminatory comment she had been forced to record, every talented performer Eric had dismissed for prejudiced reasons, all of it was about to become evidence in his professional destruction. Eric's desperation was becoming more apparent with each passing second. "Look, the business is complicated. Market forces, audience expectations, network preferences. I was just trying to do what was best for the company." "What was best for the company?" Layla repeated, her tone suggesting she was tasting the words and finding them distasteful. "Is that what you thought you were doing when you told me I should consider background work? When you dismissed the dozens of qualified performers whose only crime was failing to match your prejudiced vision of what talent looks like?" The studio had become a theater for this confrontation, with every staff member now understanding they were witnessing a pivotal moment in the company's history. This wasn't just about Eric's comeuppance, though that element was certainly satisfying for those who had been forced to watch his discrimination in action. This was about fundamental change, about new leadership that would transform how the studio operated. Eric's attempts at explanation became increasingly pathetic as the reality of his situation solidified. "If I made mistakes, if my approach seemed harsh, we can work together to modify procedures. I have experience, institutional knowledge. Surely we can find a way to move forward that benefits everyone." Layla's smile was polite and absolutely terrifying in its professional composure. "Oh, we will definitely be moving forward, Eric. Just not in the way you're hoping." The power dynamic in the room had completed its reversal so thoroughly that it seemed to have physical weight. Where Eric had once stood as the unquestioned authority, dismissing dreams and crushing aspirations with casual indifference, he now stood as a man whose career had just ended with the same abrupt finality he had visited upon so many others. Word of this confrontation would spread through the studio within hours. carried by the staff members who had been forced to witness Eric's discrimination and were now seeing justice delivered with surgical precision. The actress who had just been dismissed would hear about it. The dozens of performers Eric had rejected for prejudiced reasons would hear about it. The industry that had enabled his behavior through willful blindness would hear about it. Layla Hassan had returned to the scene of her humiliation, not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a leader implementing justice. The casting studio that had once been Eric Donovan's kingdom of discrimination was about to become the birthplace of systematic change. The natural daylight streaming through those windows now illuminated not the end of dreams, but their resurrection under new management that understood the true meaning of talent and opportunity. Eric Donovan's reign of discriminatory terror was over, ended by the very woman whose dreams he had so casually attempted to destroy. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of poetic timing that even Hollywood's best screenwriters would have envied. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Layla Hassan's corner office, casting everything in brilliant natural light. She sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, her red power suit a stark contrast to the neutral tones of her executive suite. Across from her, Raymond Torres, the head of human resources, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his orange dress shirt and navy slacks impeccable despite the early hour. "The evidence is overwhelming, Miss Hassan," Raymond said, his voice heavy with the weight of what they'd uncovered. Spread across the desk between them were years of casting records, each file telling the same disturbing story. 3 years of documented patterns. Eric Donovan systematically excluded qualified minority actors from major roles, relegating them to background work or rejecting them entirely. Layla Hassan picked up one of the files, her expression remaining professionally neutral despite the fire burning in her chest. The statistics were damning. Of the 47 leading roles cast under Eric Donovan's direction in the past 3 years, only 2 had gone to black actors. Both were supporting characters in what the industry euphemistically called urban projects. "This file here," Raymond continued, pointing to a particularly thick folder, documents 17 separate incidents where Eric Donovan made inappropriate comments about actors' appearances, specifically targeting women of color. The language he used was consistently derogatory and discriminatory. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly as Layla Hassan absorbed the magnitude of Eric Donovan's systematic bias. Each rejected headshot represented a dream deferred, a talented individual dismissed not for lack of ability, but for the color of their skin. She thought of her own devastating rejection 18 months ago, now understanding it wasn't personal cruelty, but institutional racism disguised as creative decision-making. "Have you spoken with Monique Fields yet?" Layla Hassan asked, setting down the file with deliberate precision. Raymond nodded grimly. "She's agreed to provide formal testimony. After years of witnessing Eric Donovan's behavior, she's finally ready to speak on the record. She has detailed notes spanning back 2 years, documenting incidents she was too frightened to report at the time." The office door opened with a soft knock, and Monique Fields entered, her professional demeanor masking years of suppressed anxiety. She wore a conservative red blouse and black skirt, her posture more confident than it had been during the years she'd worked under Eric Donovan's shadow. "Miss Hassan," Monique began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, "I need to tell you everything I witnessed. Eric Donovan's discriminatory practices weren't occasional lapses in judgment. They were deliberate, systematic, and cruel." Layla Hassan gestured for Monique to take a seat, her expression encouraging but professional. The natural daylight streaming through the windows seemed to illuminate the courage building in Monique's eyes. "Tell me about the pattern," Layla Hassan said softly. Monique took a deep breath before speaking. "Eric Donovan would review headshots before actors even entered the room. I watched him sort them into piles, separating minority actors immediately. He had code words he'd use. Black actors were not aspirational enough for family-friendly content. Latina actresses were too ethnic for mainstream appeal. Asian actors were limiting for international markets. The language was always carefully chosen to avoid obvious discrimination, but the intent was clear. Raymond Torres took notes as Monique continued, documenting each revelation with methodical precision. The evidence was building into an indisputable case of systematic bias that would be impossible for Eric Donovan to explain away. There were casting sessions where Eric Donovan would allow minority actors to audition, but only after he had already decided on white actors for the roles. Monique continued, her voice gaining strength. He treated the diversity auditions as performances for his own entertainment, sometimes making mocking comments after the actors left. He called it checking the boxes for legal compliance. Layla Hassan felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her professional composure. Each revelation validated her decision to orchestrate Eric Donovan's downfall, transforming personal revenge into systemic justice. "What about the incident with the romantic comedy last spring?" Raymond asked, consulting his notes. Monique's expression darkened. Eric Donovan rejected a highly qualified black actress for the female lead, claiming that interracial romance would hurt box office numbers in certain markets. When the studio executives questioned his decision, he fabricated concerns about her acting ability and suggested she lacked the girl-next-door appeal they needed. She was a Juilliard graduate with extensive theater credits. The methodical documentation of Eric Donovan's discrimination created a sense of inevitable justice for everyone in the room. Layla Hassan could feel the satisfaction of watching a corrupt system finally face accountability. "I have recordings," Monique said quietly, producing a small digital device. "I started recording our staff meetings 6 months ago when Eric Donovan's behavior became increasingly brazen. He felt protected by his position and stopped being careful about his language." Raymond Torres and Layla Hassan exchanged glances, both understanding the significance of documented evidence. The recordings would make Eric Donovan's discriminatory patterns impossible to deny or minimize. "Monique," Layla Hassan said, her voice filled with genuine respect, "your courage in speaking out will help ensure this never happens to other actors. You're not just providing testimony, you're helping create systemic change." The office door opened again as Christopher Adeyemi entered, his green button-down shirt and navy slacks crisp despite the early meeting time. His expression mixed professional satisfaction with personal pride as he surveyed the evidence spread across Layla Hassan's desk. "The Harvard MBA network is buzzing about your acquisition," Christopher said, settling into a chair. "Wall Street analysts are calling it a masterclass in strategic corporate takeover. But seeing this evidence, I understand the deeper motivation behind your business strategy." Layla Hassan smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd displayed all morning. The financial opportunity was real, but justice was always the primary objective. Eric Donovan's discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically wasteful. Diverse content performs well when given proper support and marketing. Raymond Torres gathered the files into organized stacks. "What's our timeline for implementing the new casting protocols?" "Immediate implementation," Layla Hassan replied decisively. "I want diversity initiatives in place by next week. Fair casting protocols become mandatory for all projects. Sensitivity training for all department heads starts Monday. Eric Donovan's system gets dismantled completely and replaced with something worthy of the talent this industry possesses." Christopher Adeyemi leaned forward, his business instincts engaged. "What about Eric Donovan himself? His professional network is already starting to distance themselves as word spreads about the ownership change and his impending review." Through the bright windows, they could see Eric Donovan crossing the studio lot, his phone pressed to his ear in what appeared to be an increasingly desperate conversation. His usual confident stride had been replaced by hurried, anxious movements. "Industry contacts, who used to take his calls immediately, are suddenly unavailable," Monique observed. "His assistant told me He's been trying to schedule meetings with other casting directors and producers, but everyone's making excuses. The Hollywood rumor mill works faster than official announcements. Layla Hassan stood and walked to the windows, watching Eric Donovan's frantic phone conversation. The natural daylight illuminated her satisfied expression as she observed his growing panic. "Christopher, what are you hearing from your entertainment industry contacts?" she asked. Eric Donovan's reputation was already questionable among progressive producers, Christopher replied. "Your acquisition and the rumors about systematic discrimination have made him toxic. Even his former allies are protecting themselves by cutting ties." Raymond Torres looked up from his notes. Investigative journalist Chloe Fairbanks called this morning requesting an interview. She's researching a larger story about discrimination patterns in Hollywood casting. Apparently, Eric Donovan's situation is part of a broader industry reckoning she's documenting. The convergence of Eric Donovan's professional isolation, documented evidence of discrimination, and media attention created the perfect storm for accountability. Layla Hassan could see the complete dismantling of the system that had once rejected her so cruelly. Schedule the interview with Chloe Fairbanks for next week, Layla Hassan decided. After Eric Donovan's formal disciplinary hearing, I want our new policies in place before we discuss the systematic changes we're implementing. Monique Fields gathered her courage for one final revelation. "Ms. Hassan, there's something else. Eric Donovan has been reaching out to actors he previously rejected, trying to offer them roles now. He's claiming the previous rejections were due to budget constraints or script changes, not discrimination. He's trying to cover his tracks." The desperate nature of Eric Donovan's attempts to rewrite history only highlighted his awareness of the damning evidence against him. His professional panic validated everything Layla Hassan had worked toward over the past 18 months. "Document every contact he makes," Layla Hassan instructed. "His attempts to retroactively justify discrimination will only strengthen our case for systematic bias." Christopher Adeyemi stood, preparing to leave. "Layla, what you've accomplished goes beyond business strategy or personal revenge. You've created a model for using corporate power to address institutional discrimination. Other industries are watching this transformation." As the meeting concluded, Layla Hassan remained at the windows, watching Eric Donovan's continued phone calls grow more agitated. The bright overhead lighting in her office seemed to symbolize the transparency and accountability she was bringing to an industry long plagued by hidden discrimination. The systematic dismantling of Eric Donovan's discriminatory regime provided methodical satisfaction. Each piece of evidence, another nail in the coffin of institutional bias. Monique Fields' courage in speaking truth to power created redemption for everyone who had remained silent too long. The overwhelming documentation of discrimination validated the scope of the problem while highlighting the necessity of comprehensive change. Eric Donovan's growing isolation amplified his downfall, transforming him from powerful gatekeeper to industry pariah in a matter of days. The positive changes Layla Hassan implemented demonstrated the constructive use of corporate power, creating hope for systemic transformation that extended far beyond personal vindication. Tomorrow would bring Eric Donovan's formal disciplinary hearing and the final phase of his professional reckoning. But today had established something far more important than individual accountability. Today had begun the systematic reconstruction of an industry's moral foundation, proving that strategic thinking, combined with unwavering determination, could transform institutional discrimination into lasting positive change. 6 months had passed since Eric Donovan's spectacular downfall, and the morning sun streamed through the same floor-to-ceiling windows of the casting studio where Layla Hassan had once faced her greatest humiliation. But today, the space buzzed with an entirely different energy. Natural skylight illuminated a scene that would have been impossible under Eric Donovan's reign. Actors of every background, age, and appearance sat confidently in the waiting area, their headshots reflecting the authentic diversity of America itself. Layla Hassan stood at the studio's entrance, wearing a red blazer over a crisp white blouse and charcoal slacks, observing the casting session with quiet satisfaction. The same fluorescent lights that had witnessed her degradation now shone down on a revolutionized process. Where Eric Donovan had once sneered at talent that didn't fit his narrow vision, casting director Maria Santos conducted sessions with professionalism and genuine enthusiasm for discovering authentic stories. Next, we'd like to see James Washington for the lead role, Maria announced, her voice carrying none of the dismissive undertones that had characterized Eric Donovan's approach. A talented black actor rose from his seat, confident and prepared, knowing he would be judged solely on his craft and suitability for the character. The transformation was complete, but it hadn't happened overnight. After Chloe Fairbanks's devastating exposé had run in Variety, detailing Eric Donovan's years of systematic discrimination, the industry had reacted swiftly. The article, titled "The Gatekeeper's Fall: How One Man's Bias Blocked Countless Dreams," had sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Within days, Eric Donovan found himself unemployed and unemployable, his professional network evaporating as executives scrambled to distance themselves from his toxic reputation. Layla Hassan walked through the studio's corridors, past walls now adorned with posters from their recent successful productions. Each project told stories that Eric Donovan would have deemed unmarketable, yet they had not only found audiences, but had proven profitable beyond projections. The numbers spoke louder than any ideology. Authentic storytelling resonated with viewers hungry for genuine representation. In the main conference room, where overhead fluorescent lighting created the perfect environment for important announcements, Layla Hassan prepared to address the entire studio staff. Word had spread that their CEO had significant news to share, and anticipation filled the bright space as employees filed in. The room that had once echoed with Eric Donovan's discriminatory comments now served as the heart of progressive change. 6 months ago, we committed to transforming not just our casting practices, but our entire approach to storytelling. Layla Hassan began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned her position through both strategic brilliance and moral clarity. Today, I'm proud to share the results of our collective efforts. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, revealing financial projections that exceeded their most optimistic forecasts. Our diverse slate of projects has outperformed industry averages by 37%. More importantly, we've discovered and developed talent that our previous leadership would have overlooked entirely. Monique Field sat in the front row, wearing a professional red dress that reflected her new status as senior casting coordinator. Her promotion had been one of Layla Hassan's first decisions, recognizing both her potential and her moral courage in documenting Eric Donovan's discriminatory behavior. The woman who had once silently witnessed injustice now actively championed fair practices, her experience making her uniquely qualified to ensure that discrimination never again took root in their casting process. Our success isn't measured only in box office returns, Layla Hassan continued, advancing to slides showcasing critical acclaim and industry recognition. We've received commendations from the NAACP, the Directors Guild, and the Screen Actors Guild for our commitment to authentic representation. 3 of our productions have been selected for major film festivals, and 2 have received early awards consideration. The room erupted in applause, but Layla Hassan's expression remained focused. She understood that individual success meant nothing without systemic change, and her next announcement would address that broader vision. More significantly, 7 major studios have contacted us requesting consultation on implementing similar diversity initiatives. What began as our internal transformation is becoming an industry-wide movement toward genuine inclusion. Christopher Adeyemi, visiting from his private equity firm and wearing an orange button-down with navy slacks, nodded approvingly from the back of the room. Their Harvard MBA training had prepared them for corporate strategy, but neither had anticipated the cultural impact their business decision would generate. The financial returns had exceeded projections, but the social change felt even more valuable. As the meeting concluded and staff members returned to their projects, Layla Hassan felt a familiar presence approaching. Her uncle Samuel Hassan, distinguished in his blue jacket that marked his status as a successful elder businessman, had flown in from Chicago to witness the fruits of their collaboration. "I've seen many investments over 4 decades," Samuel Hassan said, his voice filled with pride as they walked toward Layla Hassan's corner office. "But none have delivered returns like this. Financial success is gratifying, but watching you transform an entire industry culture, that's a legacy worth building." They settled into Layla Hassan's office, where natural light from multiple windows created an atmosphere of openness and transparency that contrasted sharply with the shadowy corners where Eric Donovan's discrimination had once festered. The walls displayed awards and recognition from various industry organizations, each one representing another step away from the exclusionary practices of the past. The most remarkable part, Layla Hassan reflected, reviewing reports from their human resources department, is how quickly everything changed once we removed the barriers. The talent was always there. Eric Donovan's system simply prevented it from being seen. A gentle knock interrupted their conversation. Helena Vasquez, the entertainment lawyer who had orchestrated their acquisition, entered wearing her signature red suit. Her legal expertise had been crucial in navigating the complex regulatory requirements for their industry reforms, ensuring that their changes would withstand any legal challenges. "I have news from the California Entertainment Commission," Helena Vasquez announced, her expression brightening. "They're proposing new industry-wide guidelines based on our diversity protocols. Your transformation has become the template for systemic reform across Hollywood." The magnitude of this development settled over them like sunshine breaking through clouds. What had begun as personal justice for one woman's humiliation had evolved into a movement capable of reshaping an entire industry's approach to inclusion and representation. Later that afternoon, as the studio buzzed with productive energy, Fatima Diallo arrived for her costume fitting. Layla Hassan's friend and fellow actress had booked the lead role in their upcoming production through the reformed casting system, her talent finally receiving the recognition it deserved. She wore a red top and black jeans, her confidence radiating the security of knowing she had been chosen for her abilities rather than despite her appearance. "6 months ago, I was ready to give up on acting entirely," Fatima Diallo confided as they walked through the production offices. "Eric Donovan had made it clear that women like us weren't welcome in leading roles. Now I'm preparing for the biggest opportunity of my career, and it feels surreal." Their conversation was interrupted by Raymond Torres, the head of human resources, wearing an orange polo shirt and khaki slacks as he approached with the latest diversity metrics. His documentation of Eric Donovan's violations had been instrumental in the legal proceedings that led to the disgraced casting director's termination and industry blacklisting. "Our employee satisfaction surveys show unprecedented scores," Raymond Torres reported. "Staff members consistently cite the inclusive environment and fair practices as primary reasons for their job satisfaction. We've also seen a 43% increase in applications from underrepresented groups seeking positions at the studio." As evening approached and the studio's activity wound down, Layla Hassan found herself alone in the casting room where her journey had begun. The space looked identical physically, but its spiritual transformation was complete. The same fluorescent lights that had illuminated Eric Donovan's cruelty now shone on opportunity and justice. She thought about Eric Donovan's current situation, unemployed and unemployable, after Chloe Fairbanks's exposé had detailed his pattern of discrimination to the entire industry. His professional exile served as both justice and warning to others who might consider similar behavior. The system that had once protected discriminatory gatekeepers now held them accountable for their actions. But Layla Hassan's reflection focused more on the future than the past. Her transformation from humiliated actress to industry changemaker proved that institutional discrimination, no matter how entrenched, could be overcome through strategic thinking, determination, and moral clarity. The little girl who had dreamed of seeing herself represented on screen had grown into a woman capable of ensuring that future dreamers would find doors open rather than slammed shut. The casting studio fell quiet as Layla Hassan turned off the lights. But the revolution she had started continued burning brightly across an industry finally ready to embrace its full potential. Tomorrow would bring new auditions, new stories, and new opportunities for talent that previous regimes would have ignored. Her journey from victim to victor to changemaker was complete. But the story she had started would continue writing itself through every actor who found opportunity where barriers once stood, every story that reflected authentic diversity, and every young person who saw themselves represented on screen and dared to dream bigger. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.